Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to one more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And this week, joining us from the USA is Mike Richards. Hey, Mike. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Vasco. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So Mike has over a decade in tech, and he goes beyond managing projects. He's passionate about transforming organizations, coaching them on cloud migration, leading digital transformations, and empowering agile teams. More than a consultant, Mike is a catalyst for growth and change. And we're going to talk about growth and change a lot this week. But Mike, that was a short intro. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming a Scrum Master?
Yeah, thanks so much for the intro, Vasco. Yeah, like you said, I'm based in the United States in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, born and raised here, and excited to talk with you here this week. So always an interesting question on how people get into a Scrum Master, because it's never a straight line, it seems. I was with a financial services organization leading their IT department for about a decade. And I was a little bit looking for a change. Wanted to be in a more specific domain rather than general sort of IT, software, hardware, straddling that line. I wanted to become a little bit more specialized. So I decided to take night classes and I studied for the PMP certification. So took a couple of classes on project management that are required for that certification, and then also a test prep class as well. And took the PMP and passed it and used that to sort of augment my resume to make it clear that I knew what I was talking about when it came to project management, Scrum mastering, that kind of domain without having that title in my background. So I was then able to find a job in consulting, and I haven't looked back since. I've been in consulting for over a decade in all kinds of different technical projects from hardware to software, and really have had the benefit of having a very large experience across a lot of different domains, a lot of different industries.
Yeah, both consulting and Scrum Master kind of forces you to face many different environments, right? Because when we are Scrum Masters, we are also usually helping different teams in multiple environments. Scrum as a discipline is not necessarily domain specific, and that's an important thing to realize, of course. There are many even marketing companies using Scrum, for example. But many of those stories, of course, also lead to learnings. And that's what we want to explore here on this Fail Monday here, Mike. And the reason why we do that, of course, is because we want to learn, get those takeaways, and hopefully avoid, or if not avoid, at least learn what to do when we do make similar mistakes. So, Mike, tell us a story of a moment where you as a Scrum Master, you did your best, but as it so often happens, the best just wasn't good enough. Tell us that story. We'll dive into the takeaways later, but tell us the story first.
Yeah, I appreciate that question because I think that I know I personally grow the most when I'm able to make safe mistakes, sometimes maybe not so safe, and then learning from them and growing from them. And I got a lot of failure stories. So the first one that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to set up a little bit because as a consultant, we balancing the iron triangle, so scope, budget, and timeline being that iron triangle. It's especially hard being a consultant because oftentimes the budget and the timeline are effectively fixed. They aren't literally fixed in any sort of contract, but getting budgets and timelines to move when you're a consultant is particularly difficult. So as a Scrum Master, I was leading a project where all three parts of that iron triangle were at risk, which is never a place you want to be. The team that I was the Scrum Master of had been working on a mobile application for about a month, and I got added to that team after they had already gotten started. When I got in, I do what I usually do when I am given a project that is already in flight. I start asking questions. I think asking questions from a place of curiosity and not accusation is always a really good method as a Scrum Master in general. Even if you might know the answer, rather than bringing the answer to people, asking them questions and being curious about things is an oftentimes easier way to get to that. So after asking those questions, I found out that the app was really being gold plated. The teams were working on some very cool, flashy features of the application before the core functionality of what it actually needed to do had even been touched. So with that scope being completely blown up, I came to realize that hitting the minimum viable product in the time and the budget that was provided, it just wasn't going to happen. So after figuring that out, rather than delivering that information and talking to the client about it, about bringing up different options, different levers that we could pull to balance that iron triangle, me and the team just decided that we would try and make up some lost time. So everybody internally had agreed that we were behind, and we thought we could make up some time by not cutting corners, but just kind of working more effectively and more focused on that core functionality. And spoiler alert, it did not work out very well. We still were
Usually it
behind on
doesn't, right?
time.
Because the scope catches up with you, and what you thought was whatever type of complexity or difficulty ends up being a lot more complex, and not all the information being available. The usual stuff, right? But tell me a little bit more. How was that conversation with the team? First, you had to get them to acknowledge the problem of us being late and probably delivering the wrong functionality. So that's step one. And then step two, to actually agree to try to do something about it. So how was that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about in projects death by a thousand cuts. It's not often that the big parts of that iron triangle become at risk because of one or two events. It's usually a lot of small ones. So it's like I mentioned, gold plating, it's things that are kind of beyond that MVP, or maybe a couple of tasks took a little bit longer than expected, and then a couple more, and then designs were a little late, so development was a little late. And so it's hard to see that when you're just in it, when you're sprinting and you're working as a team and you're delivering on those sprint deliverables most of the time. It's hard to see that 10,000-foot view
Yeah, because we're
when
just
you're
so much into the tasks, right? And want to get them done. We don't have time to kind of zoom out and see where it all is going.
exactly. And the team was seeing progress, and the stakeholders were seeing cool stuff that were very flashy. But again, it was built on stilts. It wasn't built on a solid foundation of the what the application needed to do. So bringing that to light to be able to show the team that yes, we've made progress, but that progress hasn't been around the core deliverables that we were expected to make progress against. And so that sort of shattered the glass for everybody and made them realize that, yeah, we're all patting each other on the back and super happy about what we did, and that's great, but we're missing the goal here. We're not throwing the dart at the right target
So,
even.
so
And
let me guess. I mean, I don't know, but I imagine like a meeting where you say, okay, here's the functionality that we need to deliver, bum, 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 a list of those. And here's what we have delivered, a list of those. And then the middle, the overlap was very small. Is that what you're saying? Like something like that?
yeah, it's just presenting that information and in a consumable way. So not spending a bunch of time burning down estimates on what is left or burning down estimates on what we've done. Just coming to a general synopsis of the minimum needed data to be able to have everybody nod their heads and agree with that. Just coming to the table with that information and kind of asking them like, I'm seeing this as an issue and this is why. Do you agree? Is this something that you agree with? And maybe there were some things that they didn't that I had to sort of modify or get some more information on, but it was easier to do maybe than you might think to just have the team take a big step back and remind them what we're doing and why, and make them realize the stuff that they've been working on don't necessarily align with that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that conversation did not end with a lot of happy faces. So how did you manage that? Because, taking that and then moving on to trying to make up some time as you did, that's not necessarily very easy. How did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, not well, Vasco. That's one of the mistakes that I made during that is what I would have liked to tell you is that we continued working, refocused on what the scope was that we needed to do, and then started to have conversations of how to pull levers to fix that iron triangle. I didn't do that last part. We just thought that as a team, we could sort of put our heads down and a miracle would happen. And so we came up with a plan of how to make sure that we drill down into the minimum viable product, the small scope that we need to deliver in order for that application to meet the expectations of our client. And we got that stuff and we prioritized that in the backlog and started burning that down while documenting, not ignoring the gold plating features that weren't needed. So right approach, right? But we knew that even having done that, the timeline and the budget were still very much at risk. And rather than having those discussions early, no bad news gets better with age. We thought maybe it would, and maybe we would pull out a miracle, and the thing that we thought would take 3 months would all of a sudden take two, and that just oftentimes doesn't happen, and it didn't
So
in this
how did you
scenario.
then manage the relationship with the customer? That would be question one. And then of course I would like to hear your thoughts on, going back and doing something different. But first the relationship with the customers, like what did you try then? Because eventually over time it became obvious that the project wasn't going to be delivered.
Yeah, so once we did get to a point where I realized that that miracle was not forthcoming, then had that conversation with the client about the gold plating and the 1,000 cuts that killed our timeline and our budget. So the effort in order to go back and document that was much more difficult waiting than it would have been at the time when we first realized that it was at risk. So that conversation became much more difficult because we were, a month later into the timeline. We were a month more into the budget. So it just made that issue a lot more complicated and a lot harder to manage with the client. They were upset. They were upset that we were going over budget and timeline. That was something that was very, again, fixed, if not literally, at least in most people's minds, it was. So asking for more time, asking for more budget was not an easy conversation to have. So it was just hat in hand coming to them with the real information about what it was that we had worked on that we had not originally planned for that caused that 1,000 cuts. So it was this small feature took an extra day. This small feature took an extra week. And just elaborating and giving them that information and providing them with transparency why we're at where we're at, and then offering them options, levers to pull on how to get out of it. So it's not just throwing money at a problem.
So if you could though go back and kind of replay that story all over again, what would be the key things you would have done differently?
Well, first, it's not expecting miracles. That's never something that, as a Scrum Master or any leader, that you should ever expect. You can hope for the best, but you need to plan for the worst, and plan is the operative word there. So it's in realizing that risks are risk, and if you are doing what you should be doing as a Scrum Master or as a leader, and trusting your intuition and not worrying about being the boy who cried wolf and always sort of calling out problems, even if they don't end up materializing. That's your job. That's what you need to be doing. You need to be delivering risks in a calm, solution-oriented way so that those are understood by everybody and are accepted as just part of doing business. They aren't a come to Jesus meeting where we need to have these very difficult conversations. We just need to be having them early and often. Sometimes those risks aren't going to end up becoming issues. Sometimes they are. And it's just important to make sure that you're airing those and talking not just in silos within your teams or even just with your devs, with the entire team, including stakeholders that are executives or clients or whomever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very important aspect to learn. Many project managers also avoid that type of conversations, perhaps hoping for a miracle. And we as Scrum Masters, we have the advantage, but also the responsibility to accept that it is not us who do the work, And we need to be upfront and clear with the people who do the work about how they also need to communicate what is going on to the customer, right? It's not just the Scrum Master bringing the bad news, but the whole team together bringing the bad news. But it might be on us to make sure that the team is ready and has a message clear and has those different options, as you say, to present the client to try to recover. It's a great story. Thank you for sharing that, Mike.
Yeah.
Monday is about what we learn from our obstacles and our failures. But tomorrow is Team Tuesday here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. We explore teams and their journeys, the habits they develop that threaten their performance, how each of our guests help their teams evolve, and the one key lesson they learned from that experience. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.